James Palmer here with you for an Insider Notebook. Going to give you all the scoops around the NFL. A lot of topics we want to get to over the next half hour. Make sure you throw a couple chats in there if you're watching this on YouTube. I'd love to interact with all of you. I try to, in between each and every topic, go to the chat, try to be able to answer a couple of things and see if we can create the dialogue about some other topics that maybe aren't on our list today, but you're curious about. Injury is always a big one. It's Wednesday. We start finding out some information about those oftentimes with players. But we also have some quarterback changes, some play caller changes. We have some different things to get to. We'll start with the quarterback situation with the Giants. At the top of this show, we're going to talk about that tush-push controversy and why it's different than it was in the past last year when this was a controversy. We'll get into the Cowboys injuries, a couple of big ones. CeeDee Lamb's on my fantasy team. I'm not happy about this. What's going to go on with Nick Bosa being out for the 49ers? What does that mean for him? What does it mean for this defense and their chances of winning the division? They are undefeated right now. The Titans change play callers. Brian Callahan gives that up. What could that mean? We'll get to that. And also Caleb Williams, what I've heard around the league about that big outing he had against his former head coach in Matt Eberflus. So we'll start with the Giants and start with how things kind of percolated in this direction very, very quickly with Jaxson Dart being named the starter by head coach Brian Daboll. Now, remember, we go back to throughout all of camp, Daboll was steadfast in how he approached the quarterback battle, and there really wasn't one. It was that Russell Wilson was going to be the starter. He didn't deviate from that. You saw that he kept that, even though Jaxson Dart had an outstanding preseason, played great in camp. They continued to put more on his plate, to my understanding, and he kept really checking off each and every one of these boxes as he went through the process of camp and preseason and the regular season, while Russell Wilson was entrenched as that starter. But what ended up happening, even after a really, really good game against the Dallas Cowboys, putting up 450 yards or so, he has this outing against the Chiefs defense there, that final sequence going on there towards the goal line where there were more targets aimed at security guards and goalposts than there were Giants receivers. And we saw the inability to move the football. I think 2 interceptions, no touchdowns, 160 total yards. The Giants had been mulling this decision. They had things in place for Jaxson Dart in some of these games if a change was going to happen. In each of the last 2 games, he played 3 snaps. He didn't really do anything, but he got on the field, which actually was kind of an interesting dynamic for Daboll, but to my understanding, part of the process of getting him ready to be the starter when he took over. Now, they didn't want it to happen this quickly, but because of that performance of Russell Wilson, because of them being 0-3, and because of them seeing kind of a disgruntled Malik Neighbors, to my understanding, there was a concern about potentially losing the locker room with guys like Malik Neighbors when they all know that, players do kind of gravitate towards Jaxson Dart. He does create a spark to that offense. You saw it during the preseason, the energy he brought. And so Brian Daboll on Tuesday told both quarterbacks that a change was going to be made, and that's where they are right now. Now, there was some thought that there was going to be a change for the Saints game next week, because we'll get into what we may see from Dart on Sunday, but he's playing a Chargers team that's 3-0 with Jesse Minter running that defense, which if you don't know that name, you should. He is a fast-rising defensive mind in the NFL, and some believe in a couple of years could be a head coach. He runs a very complicated, difficult defense to dissect for quarterbacks, and that's where Jaxson Dart's going to start this off. Some people thought, maybe going against the Saints next week was a better play. Giants thought about it, but they end up pulling the trigger, maybe for some of the reasons that I just stated. Before we get to what we'll see with Dart, here's kind of Russell Wilson's future. And we do have to look backwards before we go forwards. They signed Russell Wilson to a 1-year, $10 million contract. That was mainly because they didn't have a quarterback at all. They struck out on Matthew Stafford. They struck out on Aaron Rodgers. They needed somebody in place prior to the draft. You don't know if you're going to get a quarterback in the draft. You might have loved Jaxson Dart and you traded up to get him, but you never know if you're going to get the guy you want. You needed a quarterback in place, and that's kind of where they stood with Russell Wilson, to my understanding. Now, what we've seen through 3 games, the moon ball's still there. It's still beautiful. But you saw against the Chiefs, and I talked to people around the league about this, is they're waiting for it. There's no intermediate game, really. He doesn't see the field the same way he did when he was younger. I'm not sure why, but that's the opinion of some people around the league. You saw Cam Scatterbo run the ball pretty well for this offense, but it was just kind of very predictable, I was told. It dates back to last year, and I think last year plays a part in this of what his future will be. Remember, the Steelers had no idea who their quarterback was going to be. They were much more aggressive for 2025 going after Justin Fields and had no interest in bringing Russell Wilson back. So that's 2 teams back to back that have had no interest in Russell Wilson and moved on. That's the Broncos and the Steelers. So now the Giants moved on after 3 games. So you're wondering what his future could be. We have some backup quarterbacks there. We'll see if he stays on this roster. Nothing has been decided to this moment, to my understanding. They still have Jameis Winston there, and I believe Winston will probably be Dart's backup in 2026. That's something maybe that they would like. We'll see if Russ wants to get out of there, if he wants to stay in the situation that he's in. I don't know if there's a whole lot of interest around the league in Russell Wilson right now. I think the Vikings actually like what they have in Carson Wentz so far until J.J. McCarthy comes back. The Bengals really, really like Jake Browning and what he can do. If another outing is as bad as it was this past week, perhaps they make a change, but he knows that system really, really well, and they had a winning record with him last year. Last year for 7 games? Or 2 years ago? 2 years ago for 7 games, he went 3-4 and completed like 74% of his passes. So we'll see if there's a market. Right now, as we speak, it doesn't seem like there's one. What are we going to see from Jaxson Dart? I think that's what we're all curious about. They tested him repeatedly throughout camp. They tested him repeatedly throughout the preseason. They thought there was a spark. They listened to him at halftime. I think that was a big part. When he wanted to go up tempo in the second half of one of those preseason games, they said, okay, yeah, let's go do it. And a dialogue was really important, I think, to everybody involved, that there was a communication there instead of just telling a rookie kind of what to do. And so now that Andrew Thomas is back at that left tackle spot, and he came out of that game, he played half it, but he came out of it pretty healthy. I think that changes what Brian Daboll can do with Jaxson Dart. A lot of that RPO stuff, a lot of that read option stuff, that's all facing, since he's right-handed, to the right. His blind side's now covered by one of the best in the game, Andrew Thomas. You are allowed now to do some different things defensively in terms of manipulating defenders, I'm told, on that side of the ball. Now that you don't have to worry about this. Much more difficult play calling if you had to worry about the whole offensive line. So I think Andrew Thomas coming back also played a part in them waiting to when they were going to play Jaxson Dart. They were obviously hoping things would go well with Russell Wilson. But I think that's some of the stuff you're going to see. And they'd like him to get rid of the ball quickly. They'd like him to use that mobility he has. They've been dreadful on third down and the red zone. Those are two things they think some of this creativity and mobility could help this Giants team in some possible aspect. Fire Joe Shane. We miss you, Saquon and Xavier. There are some people that are kind of going, Daniel Jones is undefeated. Saquon Barkley's undefeated. We'll see. I'll say this. Everybody questions a lot of moves by front office personnel until you land the quarterback and you made the right one. If they land this one, I think a lot will be forgotten, and Jaxson Dart's a star. A lot will be forgotten. If oftentimes you miss at the quarterback spot, we know what happens in the NFL, so we'll see what ends up happening going on there. Bleacher Report chiming in. I didn't know that. If Dart doesn't start out well, do they make another change at quarterback? I think once you went to the rookie, and then if you bench him, that's always really difficult. I think it's a hard thing to do. I think that's why teams try to put off waiting and going to the rookie. I think he's here to stay. We'll see. It could blow up in spectacular fashion, but I think it's going to be Jaxson Dart for the rest of the way out. The tush-push controversy. Here we are again. I think we talked about it last week a little bit, but some things have changed, and that's why we'll bring it up. Just to remind everybody, it fell 2 votes short last year in May. Now, it's important to say that it was in May because they needed 24 votes to pass this thing. They got 22. It was initially discussed in March, and then they tabled it to May. What usually happens when things get tabled by the commissioner in the league is because they want something to pass, they just don't have the votes to pass it, and they want to use those couple of months to try to persuade teams to pass it. That's what they tried to do, because they really want this thing to be banned. The league does. It's pretty clear with their stance on it. But it's still 2 votes shy, and they head into this year, and now we're seeing a new spin on the argument against the tush push. And at first it was a competitive advantage and a safety concern. The league in those meetings and the Eagles did this very clearly. There is no data that shows that this play is any more unsafe than any other quarterback sneak or any other play that is out there. Now, the league likes to argue that they're trying to be preemptive in terms of injuries and eliminate a play that they see as dangerous. Yet again, there's no data that it's dangerous, and they want to eliminate it for injury reasons, so something gets taken out of the game prior to for it being an injury concern. Now, though, that was part of their previous argument. It still kind of is. But now, though, the argument is this, that it's not entertaining, which is very interesting. The league pushes entertainment value tremendously. Drew Brees is out there saying the Eagles are super boring. Some people knock the way that they play. It's not, again, not illegal what they do. And they just do it better than everybody else. And other teams do try to do it. But for some reason, an entertainment aspect has become part of this argument. But more importantly, that it's difficult to officiate. And Dean Blandino, I think, made this thing go to another level when he was doing that Eagles Chiefs game on national television. And he says, I'm done with the tush push. It's just too hard to officiate. Because there were several false starts with it. And the Eagles were, getting an advantage with the way it false starts. But the pushback I hear from people around the league is, well, okay, if it's difficult to officiate, are we going to get rid of any play that's difficult to officiate? Offensive pass interference is difficult to officiate. You could possibly call holding on every single play. If plays are hard to officiate, do we get rid of them? And I think the other aspect of it is, if nobody's pushing from behind, will the Eagles still be trying to get a head start in the neutral zone and try to get a little bit of a head start if they're going to be using this play with just Jalen Hurts? Of course. So then are you going to be able to continue the it's difficult to officiate rule? Because the argument with that, and this is the pushback, nice play on words, James, thank you, appreciate it. People around the league that are in favor of the tush push say are, whether anybody's pushing him from behind or not, you're saying the issues with officiating it are how players are lined up and how tight the play is, and if they move before the ball is snapped, it's very difficult. That will not change if you ban the play. So that's kind of the interesting part of that it's difficult to officiate being part of this. Now, I do think the reason that this could possibly get 2 more votes and pass, like the league wants, is there were some teams, to my understanding, in that room going, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. They're the only ones that really run the tush push like this. They're the only ones that are successful at it like they are. I don't want to be petty and ban a play because the Super Bowl champions went out and used it. We're going to find a way to beat it in 2025. I'm voting against it. I don't want to vote on a play because I'm petty. Well, that'll be gone possibly unless the Eagles win the Super Bowl again, and that could change a couple of teams' votings. We'll see, but it has taken an interesting turn that officiating has become really the biggest argument that people are making against this play, and we'll see if it ends up getting the favor that the league wants. So we'll see. Let's go, Jax. Does it say fart on the Chargers? I read it, so we'll see. That Chargers team is going to be tough, by the way. I'll just say that now that you reminded me that's who they're playing. That is a complicated secondary. Keep your eye on Derwin James. If you're Jaxson Dart, look for number 3 before every snap. I'm not telling him anything that anybody in that building is not telling him, but that's it. Cowboys injuries. I mentioned CeeDee Lamb. This is a bummer because Dak was going to throw the ball a lot, and if you got him on your fantasy team, this was a beneficial spot for you to be in because of the way that defense in Dallas is playing. But I think there's some positivity there. There's a chance they don't put him on IR. They have all the time in the world to put him up on IR prior to Sunday and continue to evaluate that ankle, which is usually what happens with these high ankle sprains. They're all different. None of them are the same. And they want to evaluate this and maybe take it up to the last possible moment before they place him on IR. And he'd have to miss 4 games if they did that, if they think there's a reason he can start coming back prior to those 4 games. So you keep looking at it over these next several days and see if he can come back prior to 4. But it is a high ankle sprain. If he missed 4 games, it would be Packers, at Jets, at Panthers, Commanders. He'd return for the game against the Denver Broncos. So there is a chance he misses 4 weeks. We'll see what ends up happening. What I was, looking at this and going is, my buddy Steve Smith and I also host a show together, and Steve was making a big point about George Pickens and being a receiver, going, this is a great opportunity for George to step into the starting role. He'll be the number 1. He is talented enough to be a number 1. Nobody in the league really disagrees with that. He's not only playing for the Dallas Cowboys in these games, CeeDee Lamb's going to be out. He's also playing for the 31 other teams that are in the NFL. He's on a 1-year prove-it deal. He wants to show everybody that, what happened in Pittsburgh with some of the issues off the field are behind him. Some of the issues that kept him from playing at an extremely high level, which some people still believe he really can. He has an opportunity now to go out in CeeDee Lamb's absence and really prove some of that, because he will be Dak's pretty much number 1 target. But you can't discredit the camaraderie and the connection and everything that Dak and CeeDee have together. It's rare in the league, and they have it in spades. So this is a big loss for Dallas. And up front, it doesn't help that you lose your first rounder in Tyler Booker, the guard. This one is more likely to go on IR. It's also a high ankle sprain, but it seems like the Cowboys are a little bit more comfortable saying he's probably going on IR than CeeDee Lamb. Again, Lamb's not ruled out from going on it, but it seems like they're a little more firm on what Booker might miss. And he's been, he's been good for them, I think, so far. I think they do like what's going on, and they've been already without their starting center, Cooper Beebe. So it's been, a little bit of a shuffling up there. And he's been on, he got put on injury reserve. So a couple of Dallas injuries that are noteworthy. Also, I want to throw one out there too, since we talked about CD and top receiver. Terry McLaurin's going to be an interesting one to watch. I wouldn't expect him to play this week. For the Commanders, he's getting multiple opinions on this quad injury, and seeing one of the most renowned specialists in terms of core muscles, which is more of that sports hernia groin area, is maybe worth noting. I think they're looking at all of these, and oftentimes when you're getting a variety of opinions, the players wanting the shortest timetable. When they hear a longer timetable, oftentimes they go, well, can we get another opinion? Maybe that's a shorter one. And I think that shows us that maybe there's some differing opinions in how this is being evaluated by some of these medical professionals, because it's kind of up in the air. So I would take a hard look at Terry McLaurin and possibly not seeing him out there this Sunday. And I don't want to be the negative Nancy here talking about all these injuries, but here we go. Nick Bosa out for the year with an ACL injury. It's a real bummer here. I'm going to grab my co-pilot in a second, but I want to mention this first. He has already had an ACL in the left knee. That was an ACL and a meniscus earlier in his career. He also had this right ACL in a partial tear in high school. Now I'm told this is a clean tear. It's about as clean of a ACL injury you can have. All the other ligaments are fine. So rehab is pretty, he understands it, sadly. He understood that the injury happened, even though the ACL test came back kind of negative, where they take your knee and they go whoop, like this on the field. I don't know if they use the word I used, whoop, but they do that with your knee, and that came back kind of inconclusive, but he knew it. That's why he gave the thumbs down to the family in the stands. And now he's going to be out. So how big of a loss is that? Let's grab this old here Microsoft Copilot, and I before the show, so I don't waste my my time and your time. Before the show, I asked the Copilot. I said, "Hey, well, what's the 49ers pressure rate in 2024 with Bosa on the field and with him off the field?" And here it is: 45% pressure rate on the quarterback with him on the field, and it's just 28% with him off the field. Not a great number, and you don't like that last year, but this is this year, and I think the 49ers are probably pleasantly in a good headspace because they're 3-0 and 2-0 in the division, and they've had all these injuries. And this is supposed to be the earlier part of the season where they were relying on a lot of young guys, specifically on defense, and there could have been some growing pains with relying on them and having Brock Purdy out and George Kittle out and Brandon Ayuk out. And last week you didn't have Jennings there. And you have all these different injuries that you're dealing with. And to have this record, I think they're pretty excited about. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, now that they're losing Bosa, on the offensive side of the ball, they do think they're going to get a lot of these guys back, obviously, soon. Still a few more weeks for Ayuk. I think Jennings right there. I think Purdy's right there. Kittle, we know, went on IR, so we know the time frame there, and that should be just a 4-game situation with him for the hamstring. And so they can weather some of this storm, get all of these guys back, and offensively be able to put up some points and be kind of an explosive type of team. And we'll see what they can kind of accomplish as a group. I think Ricky Pearsall and his kind of explosion as one of the best receivers in football so far through 3 games, I think is a nice start because you get those other guys back around him. That's great. Now, who's going to fill in for Bosa? I think we got a chance to see that because, he was lost in the second quarter. So I think they're getting a lot of really good pressure from Mikael Williams, who's their young guy, and I think he's played well. And Kyle Shannon's been actually pretty impressed with the defensive ends as a group. I think you saw Bryce Huff, who's kind of been MIA the last couple years since he left the Jets, I believe, and you saw him kind of get an increase in snaps. I think you saw Yetur Gross-Matos, who was playing kind of defensive tackle. He slid out in that game. I think you can see him out there now. I think they have the bodies to go out there. What you're missing is the closer. If you're a Super Bowl contending team, you oftentimes want to have those closers as a pass rusher. It's like why the Rams that year, when they won the Super Bowl, traded for Von Miller from Denver. It's like we need a guy who can get us a sack in the fourth quarter when we need one. And Nick Bosa is one of those guys. Von Miller is one of those guys. Myles Garrett's that guy. Micah Parsons. Those closers, those top tier pass rushers. That's what Nick Bosa is. And you saw him close out two of the games already this season with big plays in the fourth quarter towards the end of games. So there you are missing that, but they think they have bodies that are right there that can kind of help them out. And I think that make them get through this a little bit better. But I can't say enough good things about Ricky Pearsall, by the way. I just kind of want to throw that out there because I like the kid a lot. Obviously went through a lot in his rookie year. Thankfully he's here. Good grief. But he's third in the NFL in receiving in his second year. I mean, I was looking at some of his stats. He doesn't have a touchdown yet, but he's a first down machine and moving the sticks for this team. He leads the NFL in yards per target. He's been outstanding. 97 yards, 93 yards a game has been really, really good. And then you add those other guys in. It's Brock Purdy back. It's, just hold the fort and we're winning games till these guys get healthy. Another team that's not winning games, though, but they want to figure out with their quarterback situation, if they pick the right guy, is Cam Ward. And that's the Tennessee Titans. And they had the number one pick in the draft. It was the clear cut number one quarterback in this draft. Let's not argue that at all. There was nobody I spoke to during the draft process, and I talked to a lot of quarterback evaluators that didn't say Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this draft, and then there's a giant gap, and then there's everybody else. So they didn't pick the wrong guy or anything. You just want to make sure the guy you picked at one is the guy. I think there's people in that building that really like him. When I talk to people there, it's, he's kind of an old soul. He's very mature when they say that. They love that about him. The work ethic is outstanding. He has all the ingredients to be great, they say. Obviously, you got to see it on the field, and you won't know that until he plays games. But the makeup is exactly what they want. The work ethic's what they want. The maturity, all these different things. Problem is, the team around him offensively has not been great. I covered their game in week 1 against Denver. Key drops by Calvin Ridley, who's supposed to be his target. That's been an issue, and that's been a problem with what they're trying to do offensively. But they make a change at play caller, and it was head coach Brian Callahan, and he's going to give it to quarterback coach Bo Hardegree and not offensive coordinator Nick Holtz. And the reason that they're doing that is because Hardegree has experience being the interim play caller when Josh McDaniels got fired in Vegas, and he was working with a young quarterback in Aiden O'Connell back then. So they kind of like the matchup and the marriage between those two sides. You could also even say, and I just thought of this, Dave Ziegler was the general manager back then in Vegas. He's now kind of one of the lieutenants of general manager Mike Borgonzi. So he maybe had a say. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying they did seem to like his play calling. Dave was relieved the same time Josh was, but I guess he had a pretty good understanding of Bo as well. And so I think the reason we wanted to talk about this is this team has not looked very good. I think we all kind of knew that. They knew that they had to build this thing. They knew roster-wise, this new regime coming in with Mike Borgonzi was, what type of cultural guys do we need? What guys that were in previous drafts that we probably were not guys that are ours, and they're not what we want to be a part of our core moving forward. We need to flip this roster. We need to flip what we need to do. We need to make sure the head coach who this group inherited in Brian Callahan is the guy. It's a scary, slippery slope. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. When head coaches start to make changes, whether it's a coordinator is fired, whether they relieve themselves of play calling. Yes, it worked for Nick Sirianni in the beginning of his career. He's been outstanding in Philadelphia, and that team has been outstanding. But this is something to monitor because oftentimes a head coach doesn't want to take the play calling duties away from themselves. I believe Sirianni actually did because he didn't think he was doing the other things right. Brian Callahan does think there's other aspects of this team he needs to be better at. He was in defensive meetings right after he did this. So that shows you that he's going to start trying to spend some time doing other things. But some of the situational stuff hasn't been great. Some of the situational stuff in terms of the play calling, the timing, what they make certain play calls, certain challenges. All these different things have been a little bit not up to par in some people's minds in Nashville. So they make this change. Hopefully Callahan can be able to be more of a overarching head coach. The process in the which they do these play calling is not going to change. All of them still have their specific jobs, whether it's first down. I think that's like Mike McCoy or something like that. Somebody else has, red zone. They put it all together. It's just a different voice in Cam Ward's head and a different person calling the plays. But the collaborative effort of putting that game plan together is still all the same, and Brian Callahan will be part of that. But you always wonder in a young quarterback too. We're going through change already. We look at Caleb Williams and how much change he went through and how quickly that all changed for him. I mean, he had like 3 play callers in his first year. So let's see what's happening with Caleb Williams, right? So let's go to him. And coming off an outstanding performance against the Dallas Cowboys, his former head coach running that defense, and Matt Eberflus, he goes 19 of 28 for 298, 4 touchdowns to 4 different players. But the two stats that stand up to me are the zeros. It was 0 interceptions and 0 sacks. This man was sacked 68 times last year. This is the first game in his NFL career he's experienced not getting sacked. It was a big deal for him for sure. And so let's see what ends up happening with him in this second start that he's going to have. He's going against the Raiders. And what really jumped out at me when I made some calls around the league to kind of see what's going on, it was he was on time. He dropped back. He ripped it when he had to. Then there was other times where he was creative and he was able to, find wide open guys. You look at the touchdown on scrambling out to his right on 4th down. But I was told, which I thought was fascinating, was Ben Johnson's kind of learning Caleb. While Caleb's learning all of this offense from Ben Johnson, and he has to take in so much information, Ben Johnson is learning Caleb Williams, who's a very different player than Jared Goff, obviously. I don't think Jared Goff can run away from anybody. I mean, I could run backwards maybe and catch Jared Goff. I don't know. No knock on him. Played awesome on Monday night. But very different player. And that's who Ben Johnson's been with. And Ben, to my understanding, has been kind of saying, I need to accept the creativity. I need to accept the off-schedule stuff. I can't take that away from him. That's a big part of what makes him great. Do I want him to play in structure? Do I want him to play on time? Do I want his footwork to be good? Do I want him to go through progressions, which they think he's doing faster? Of course they want all that. But I think he's starting to realize he has this ace up his sleeve. Don't resort and go to it right away all the time. Bail out. You saw that last year. But when nothing's there, let's try to utilize this. And I think that's a part where they're going to kind of find that sway back and forth and play in a manner in which is best for Caleb, which Ben Johnson's figuring out, just like Caleb's trying to figure out everything Ben Johnson wants to teach him and how he wants to work. And so when I heard that, it kind of reminded me of when I was covering Patrick Mahomes in his very first season, in his second season. The guy was running all over the place, right? And in the second season, he gets that dislocated kneecap. I was actually at that game. And you started wondering if the Mahomes magic of playing off script and running around and making all these plays to Tyreek Hill downfield was going to kind of go away because they were nervous of injury. But Kansas City, when I talked to people there, were always like, no, we're never going to take that away from Patrick. It's what makes him great. We trust that he's going to protect himself injury-wise. We trust that he's going to keep himself out of harm's way. And we trust that this is going to still be an aspect of our offense while he continues to learn what Andy wants him to learn. That's the secret sauce. That's the perfect way for it to happen, is when you have a player that knows they can still do all of this stuff, like Caleb Williams. It's a special, rare talent, like Patrick has. It's a special, rare talent. But at the same time, Mahomes and Andy Reid, we're constantly working on footwork. We're constantly working on, we do still have to play on time. And as the years have gone by, he's stayed in the pocket more. Does he still find ways to run? Of course. Patrick Mahomes leads the Chiefs in rushing right now by a mile. And he has a huge game coming up against the Ravens. But both of them 1-2. How about that? One of those teams after Sunday will be 1-3. Wow. Here's a stat for you. One team since 1990 out of 252 that have started 1-3 have won the Super Bowl. And I'd say both these teams have Super Bowl aspirations. Tell me who you think it is, by the way. I'll tell you at the end. And so that's part of what the Bears are doing with Caleb Williams. They're trying to figure this out. They're trying to figure out how to find that balance like we saw with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Now, maybe nobody on the planet is Mahomes, and maybe that's a big part of this. But even as he was doing all of that, he was constantly focused on footwork and timing and playing on schedule. He knew that was going to be his career. He knew he wasn't going to play that way his whole time. So we'll see. It's building something together that's been, I think, positive in a lot of people's minds in Chicago. I just think we didn't have much patience. They actually thought he played well in that beatdown against the Lions. So let's see if we can almost make it like 3 in a row for a one Mr. Caleb Williams. I'm trying to think. I got 2 minutes. If I have anything else I want to grab, there's not a whole lot of chats here in this whole YouTube situation at all. So what's the one other thing we can talk about? How about this? Eagles Bucks. I'll do this for a minute and a half. Eagles Bucks, 2 teams that are 3-0. Heading into a week 4 game. The Bucks have won games with 59 seconds to go, 6 seconds to go, and 0 seconds to go. Their point differential is +6. I believe that's the lowest any team has ever had through 3 games with a winning record. It's remarkable. Baker's been outstanding. What I'm going to watch in this game is that, that's the best way to put it. shuffled offensive line for the Bucks going against this big physical Eagles defensive line with Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and company. They had 5 guys all come back from their offensive line in Tampa. Not a single one of them has played a snap in the position that they played last year. They only have 2 starters right now on that offensive line that are healthy, that have been healthy, and neither one of them played in the position they played last year. Now, Tristan Wirfs is expected to come back. They're all pro left tackle. The reason I say we want to watch this is he may not play left tackle in this game. He may end up playing right tackle, to my understanding. Whatever side he's moving it with better because of that arthroscopic offseason knee surgery he had, they might put him at one of those two. Remember, he came in as a right tackle into the NFL. So it's going to be interesting because that might shuffle the line a little bit more. But man, a lot of credit to the Bucks about the way they've played with that offensive line being shuffled around the way it's been. And now you got some, some big uglies, as they call them, from the Eagles coming in for this showdown. It's going to be fascinating. Somebody's going out there with a loss. It'll be interesting. Apparently, the Eagles don't play entertaining enough for some people, but they still could potentially be 4-0. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this edition of a wonderful, I think, Insider Notebook on a Wednesday here on Bleacher Report. Remember, noon every Wednesday till noon 30. James Palmer with you. Enjoy your weekend of football. It starts tomorrow.